Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Overwatch Lately, where we have a special guest today. It is going to be Joseph Volamel Franco. How's it going, man?
Good. Just getting prepared, getting ready mentally, physically, emotionally for probably the biggest day in Overwatch history to date. This is going to be a big one.
Just to be clear, you're not talking about this show. You're talking about.
No, I was under the assumption that this was the super fight. Like, is Hoxall's coming through the door, right? Like he's
yeah,
coming.
exactly.
No,
yeah,
oh,
I
okay.
appreciate it. I appreciate your kind words, but of course you're talking about grand finals. And you know what's really funny? Every time the intro comes through, there's like this amazing sound, and then all of a sudden it's me, right? I feel like it's such a disappointment, right?
I think that's pretty epic. You're here, beautiful backdrop. I think that's like Lijiang Tower. Like this is a good time.
It is a good time, but this is a show where we talk about what's been going on in Overwatch lately, and so let's go ahead and get right into it. So let's go ahead and start with some really good news. Fusion Arena broke ground, I think it was yesterday, and this is kind of a next step in esports history, right? This is the first esports-specific arena that is going up. The Comcast people are building it up, and the Fusion will be playing there in 2 years for Season 4. How does this feel to kind of see these stadiums and stuff get brought up? Do you think we're going to see more in the United States here soon?
I definitely think that more teams are going to start to open up, or at least start to announce and really draw press around where they're going to be situated for the 2020 and beyond seasons. What's interesting is I'm interested to see what else they do with these. Are they going to be rented? I know Comcast and Philly Fusion are kind of really all in with this venue arena. They do have partnerships elsewhere, so I would be interested to see what else they're going to do with this. How are they going to keep the operating costs up as we get into franchise leagues and systems throughout esports in general? It always is kind of interesting to go into the business side and really see, okay, well, you're kind of just erecting this massive arena for a couple games out of the year. What else are you using this for? Are you renting it out to other esports? Are you going to tie in? Are you going to, possibly bring Call of Duty there? Like what else are you going to do with this arena? It looks beautiful. I mean, the Wells Fargo looks great. I'm sure this is going to look fantastic. Comcast always, shells out. So I'm interested to see exactly what goes on. But yeah, it's surreal to say the least. A couple years ago, just sitting hoping, in that dead area in Overwatch history at least, to see the first home arena being built. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty surreal. It's a good word.
It's the first true home arena that someone's going to get outside of Asia, because they do have some of these in Asia already, but here in the United States it's been slow going. I kind of feel like someone actually compared esports to soccer to me earlier, and how a lot of people who are young play it, and there's a lot of interest amongst younger people, but esports has a better opportunity because they can hold that interest a little bit better. It's just something 100%. Someone said I thought was interesting.
I think it's pretty
but you speak on something that's another thing that I find interesting that I didn't really think about, and the whole multi-purpose aspect. So I was at a conference. It was the esports business conference last year, and we got to tour the very first esports arena in Las Vegas. Not like the difference between that one and this one is that one's in a casino and does other things. This one in Philadelphia is esports specific, but they had a very hard time answering the question of how do you maintain profits when no events are going on, right? Even basketball courts around here, like the Pepsi Center around here in Denver, they host lacrosse matches. Yeah. They'll have other dance competitions, other things there to prop up all the days that there's nothing going on, because the operating cost for a stadium, when
it's got to be quite high.
Yeah, exactly. And it can't just be a LAN arena either. There's no way that's going to be sustainable. So what would you suggest if you were part of their board of directors? What do you think your strategy would be?
Well, I mean, the team itself is going to have off weeks. Having them come home, do media obligations at the arena, using that facility for that purpose is a no-brainer. Outside of that, I think it would be who of them to stay within the esports gaming sector, whether it be hosting a convention that's local to Philadelphia, or bringing or erecting a new convention celebrating esports and gaming, and whatever you need, it can be put in there. And then you kind of go down to local events, this, that, the other thing. I think it would be interesting to bring other esports to the arena to kind of cross-pollinate, I guess the best word would be. So to bring, maybe a smaller esport, maybe like a Rocket League, maybe, I mean, I don't know, Halo's not really existent much anymore. God bless, that's where I kind of got my roots. But, bringing other esports to the arena and saying like, well, this is where like the Overwatch League plays. Well, that's pretty cool. Like, you start to cross-pollinate, maybe you bring over some fans, spread the love a little bit. Esports is, it needs some growth outside of just like the big propped up titles. So that would be kind of where my mind is positioned.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about at length. It's the fact that you can like two different games.
100%.
Overwatch doesn't own everything in a certain space.
No.
It's better for everyone to kind of come together. I think the best example of that is when Nate Nancer went over to Fortnite and people were like, "Oh, this is bad," and it's like, "No,
betrayal.
It's great." Yeah, exactly. It's not. If Fortnite's good, so will Overwatch League. It doesn't have to be a huge competition. But let's go ahead and move on to something a little bit more mysterious. It's Elo Hell Esports is launching something called Project Inferno, and it looks like they're going to have their own team potentially going into contenders. That's at least what I got out of it.
Sure.
But what do you think about, Elo Hell? They've done a lot for Tier 2, and they've got a couple really great people working on it. They got IOStex, former contenders coach for Uprising Academy, I believe, and Lemon Kiwi, who's very well known in the community, has done a lot of really good social stuff. Is this something that you think that they can take the mantle on, or is this kind of something that you can see? A lot of people have tried this, right? Triumph is doing a really good job in terms of, helping out Tier 2 and good social marketing, but there's not a lot of money in it. How is something like this sustainable?
That is the $1 million question, Mr. Lassard. I do not know, and if I did, I might own a team myself. Mike Illich. Hot and ready pizza. Let's get a Little Caesars team going. Detroit might need one. Just saying. Anywho, shameless plugs aside. This is the question. I don't know if they can do it. I trust that if anybody is just going to pop out and just, create a team, I like the branding. I think it's interesting. It's not just like random esports adjective team. It's got a brand. It's got, it's tied in with the parent company. What's kind of interesting to me, what's a little unnerving to say the least, I have some questions around this, is what's going to happen with the broadcast side of things? What happens with the licensing rights? Are you going to, as Blizzard, allow the parent company of one of your teams, let's say in Contenders or Open Division, broadcast a subsidiary team that, is, that there's kind of a conflict of interest there? I'm interested to see how that's handled. I don't expect Blizzard to really kick up a stink about it. I don't think that, this isn't any kind of biased against Elo Hell. I fully understand and agree that they're probably not going to do anything incredibly egregious or biased, but there's always that question. Are we saying, they're spending too much time on Inferno? Oh, they're highlighting Inferno too much. Like, that must be the bias. That's going to come. So if they get in front of that PR disaster early and either Blizzard just says, hey, you can't broadcast your games, we're going to have to give this to somebody else, or they're just stepping out of the broadcasting game, it's kind of ominous. I like the way that you formatted that. It's weird to say the least. I hope them, I wish them nothing but the best. Jen's a friend of mine. IOStex, I've done a couple podcasts with him. Seems like a good guy. It's a weird one. That is definitely strange. Again, love the branding. Everything's great. Again, hope nothing but the best. But I feel like there's going to be some fallout around this. Not super terrible fallout, but just there's going to have to be some pieces shifted.
Yeah, some questions might have to be answered. And, this is my thing. So, like, I love Elo Hell. I think what they've done for the Tier 2 community, I have nice things to say about them. But the hard thing for me is I feel like Tier 2 has this amazing ability, and only a couple of teams have currently, I think, been able to overcome this, which is really great ideas that just fizzle like a month and a half into it, right? The only team that I really can think of like that has really maintained and grown was Triumph, right? They started an Open Division, then they got the Kevin Garnett money, and now they have Apex teams. Like, they're like an actual brand that's growing, and I think that's pretty much what Elo Hell is trying to do. They have a little bit more backing. Of course, Jen's great, IOStex, they all have experience in this, but
100%.
my fear is it's hard to look at something like this and automatically dive in, because I feel like this has been tried a couple times, right? You either have to have all the money already, which they surely might have, but they've hired a bunch of new people recently. And like you said, they've been focusing on the broadcast side of things for a really long time. There are definitely some questions that need to be answered and some clarity as well that the statement, I think, attempts to, but it's more of a hype piece than I think
100%.
anything else.
Which is, I mean, it does its job. It's very exciting. You know, they had like the announcement for the announcement, that, you know, the typical like esports, you know, announcement that's months before, which was, you know, exciting. Like, okay, what's this? And then it comes out and okay, like this is different. I kind of almost wish it was just somewhere else. I think you dodge all the kerfuffle of, you know, bias and, you know, conflict of interest, this, that, the other thing. If you just moved it into, let's say, a Dota team or a Call of Duty team, you know, an upstart, you know, within an upstart team within the upper echelons of esports titles, I think that would have been beautiful. I think the branding fits. I think you still have brilliant minds leading the way. You bring in somebody from that sector, let them kind of pilot it and extend the brand that way. But because they're situated just in Overwatch, I'm like, if you want to do this, if this is your you know, picture, this is their mural on the wall, this is your big blueprint, why not start branching out elsewhere? Why does it have to just be in Overwatch? Is it just because that's all you know? I get that, but gotta fight that comfort zone eventually. Like if this is
the next logical
you know
step
what I mean?
for Elo Hell, right? Like to expand it. I think they're ready to. That's
100%. They have some fantastic assets. They have a ton of brilliant people. You know, I can't stress that enough. Why not move elsewhere? Why not get into Call of Duty? That's again kind of within the parent company, like way up the chain. But I agree with you. I think that's the next logical step for the brand, if that's what it wants to be. If it doesn't want to just be a production company, which I think they still could, which I'm sure they will. But if they want to continue being an esports like idea and team, it doesn't have to just be an Overwatch. There's a lot of issues and problems within Overwatch that, again, other franchises and other, you know, titles also have, but it doesn't cause as many weird happenings and have, you know, you're gonna have to have Blizzard come in and either okay this or act upon it, or maybe they already have and it's just not public and it won't ever be public. But I think there's gonna be PR around this, to say the least.
Yeah, and if anyone is confused, Elo Hell has received contracts from Blizzard to stream Open Division in the past, so they do have that working relationship. That's what Volamel is speaking on. So, you know, the Elo Hell thing, I think it's great. I think we need more
100%.
I would love to actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I would love to see them try to get into another game. Again, it's like the next logical step, and they have really good staff, and, you know, they're trying to, you know, help casters as well, and having them diversify their portfolios would be amazing for them. They're doing some great stuff for grand finals. Like, it's all really good things. We're just trying to see the future a little bit and see where these things might hit a little bit of a hurdle, because I appreciate that they're taking the road less traveled with a lot of this stuff, right? And you're just going the easy way isn't always the answer, but for something like this, when you're doing it for the first time, it's always going to be hard. There's gonna be some hurdles, and it's how when they deal with them will be how exactly this ends up coming to fruition. And so now, next up, it's going to be something that's really, really exciting for a lot of people. You know, our prod a little earlier and us were talking. This is arguably one of the biggest PTR changes or patch changes that we've had maybe since they released 3 characters in beta, and it's really, really exciting because they're trying to get the shield meta, it seems like, out of the way. They attempted that with goats about 4 or 5 times and were unsuccessful with it. But these changes seem to be a little bit more on the higher side, right? It's not like the shields are changing by 0.0 seconds. Like Winston Shield got a 3-second increase.
Yeah, and quite a large health pool increase. You know, we were talking before the show. Sombra getting seemingly an increased mobility that's very player skill ceiling centric. So if you're incredibly good at the hero, you're going to be able to abuse this a lot more. Tracer, you know, it's very clear where they're trying to steer the ship, right? They're trying to pivot it more towards that divey, high energy, crazy flanking, solo hero, individual skill meta. I just don't know if the pro and even semi-pro and amateur leagues are willing to shift that way. The last, I don't know, 6-7 months have been very focused around death volley, tanky compositions. I think it's going to take a long time to really rip that bad habit out. But what is interesting, and what I'm very excited to see happen more in the future, is the timing of the patch. The timing of the patch leads me to believe that Blizzard's saying, okay, we're not going to patch the game in the season anymore. We're going to leave you to your own devices. We're going to try and, throw in some little changes. If it's bad, cool, we'll try and fix it, but we're going to fix it at the midseason. We're really going to throw all the spaghetti at the wall in the midseason. And if it doesn't work, if it doesn't stick, we'll try and fix it at the end of the season. So we're not going to see these big overarching changes during the middle of competition that just throws everything awry and kind of just it poo-poos on the teams that have practiced for this patch. You practice, you sink all this time and resources, and you bring on these coaches, and they don't really get a chance to really sink their teeth in anything, and nothing really gets to develop before the next patch comes in, and then it's just a whole nother game all over again. We went from goats to a nice development into Sombra, and then we saw the dragons take on it, and then it was just the shield meta with Sigma. Okay, great. Reese is in there. We got the halt hook nonsense. Like it just keeps changing. Last year it was Brigitte. We need to be able to format this out a little bit more, and I think that's what this patch does, or at least is leading into.
Well, I think what's really cool, and something I think it's going to get a little underestimated, is the teams that are going to be playing on this patch first will most likely be contenders teams going into next season. So we're going to get to see kind of that develop, because contenders teams in the past, just like GOATs, have developed these metas. And it's not just the Overwatch League that has created these metas. A lot of the times the contenders teams have been able to develop, and the Overwatch teams have perfected some of these metas. But GOATs was an open division team, and that was in the game for 8 months to, I think, actually longer than a year.
Yeah.
So would you rather then move into, isn't that the risk, though, if we kind of slow things down a little bit, that we get trapped into another situation where multiple seasons is, well, not really multiple seasons, where an entire season might be played on a similar type of meta? Is that good for the game? It could be good for casual viewers, for sure.
I definitely think that I think it lends itself to the broadcast. I think that you can really start to lean on your statistics. You can start to draw interesting stories when you have an environment that's closed. From that, you can see developments. I think it depends on how creative teams want to be with it. We've seen teams this year be creative, Chengdu, Guangzhou, some of the Chinese teams. Even the Valiant, really leaning into the Sombra, and look what happens. You beat the Vancouver Titans, right? We're seeing creativity do well at the very least. It's not the end all be all. It's not the one thing that you need in a coach. It's not like the application, you have to be kind of crazy and zany to be able to get in the Overwatch League, but it's definitely something that teams are starting to look at a little bit more. I think it's going to take kind of a culture shift to be able to really start to see developments, start to see coaches go, okay, how are we really getting into this? We started to see it with Atlanta, with a lot of their very map-specific picks. I know Gladiators is very known for it. Obviously, Chengdu, I'll rest my case on that one. But I think it's good for the most part. I think we're getting into the habit of, okay, I don't like this, I want it changed, and then it gets changed in a couple months. We don't really get to stop and appreciate it, because last month it was, I hate goats. Goats is too slow. Goats is boring. Now it's, I hate Orisa. I don't like this either. We're kind of getting trapped in our own delusions, because we know it's just going to get changed anyway. So we don't bother watching it. We don't bother paying attention to it. It's going to get changed, and I don't have to pay attention to it. I don't have to worry about it. And we don't also get to appreciate the adaptations teams get to take. The Dragons definitely got highlighted for what they did in stage 3, but I think they deserve a lot more credit, because it was so against the grain. It was completely different from what anybody else was doing. And I think that's what the future is. It's just getting the people into the league that trust themselves, and the players kind of buy into that system. I think a slower, closed environment is better in the long run. Patches in the middle of seasonal play just throws things all out of whack and out of balance. And it everybody's okay, everybody's good, which makes nobody good, right? You want the dynasties, you want them to fall, you want the underdogs, but nobody can be an underdog when everybody's just okay by next week because there's a new patch, right?
Do you think it devalues what has already happened in a season? So let's bring up contenders once more, right?
Sure.
Because I think that's a really obvious kind of take, because they played an entire season on one patch and then they went to roll lock on the next, right?
Yep.
And so do you feel like that kind of invalidates a regular season from a team? Because a team like Gladiators Legion struggled on the previous patch, but once that roll lock came, they were all of a sudden a top 4 team.
Right.
Like, to me, that does kind of invalidate what the regular season was outside of the season for playoffs. What about you?
It definitely adds an asterisk to it. I'm not willing to just devalue it entirely. I definitely have to put some question marks around it. Like, well, would they have done this good if the patch didn't hit, as you know, when it did, if it wasn't the specific hero? Like, there are all these questions. There are all these, I wouldn't say excuses, but they have to pop up. There are these little moles that pop up that you can't infinitely just whack them all, right? That doesn't happen when we stop patching the game in the middle of a season. I'm all for creating and this is something that isn't new. This isn't a brand new idea. This has been happening. This has been in the Overwatch competitive ecosystem since 2016. We need a structured season for everybody. That everybody starts here. We have a mid-season break and we end, but there's little, pockets running each little division, nothing standardized. You can't create a plan, because if we patch it here, then when does, Contenders Pacific have their introduction to the patch, and when does China have their patch? And nothing is standardized, nothing is, uniform. And it creates a lot of messy situations where, you're going to have, the split in North America playing an entire season on one patch and then the playoffs on another. You either have to come to terms with not playing that patch until next season, or we just have to stop patching in the middle of seasonal play, or you just standardize things and really create a streamlined seasonal schedule that everybody can follow and apply it accordingly to that. It boggles me that we're what, 2 years deep if we're going off of the Overwatch, Gregorian time cycle. It's taken 2 years. I think we really need to get elbows, on the floor and really start to wrench out these plans, because it's going to keep happening. This is going to happen again and again until we fix something. There has to be a fix somewhere at a foundational level. We can't just be like, okay, well, we'll just stop patching for contenders. Okay, well, now we have a contender season that's being played 2 patches behind what you're seeing in the Overwatch League, right? Like, nobody watches contenders in the first place. God bless. I, try to keep up as much as I can. There's a lot of Overwatch. But you don't want them 2 seasons behind, right? You don't want them 2 patches behind, because nobody's going to want to watch that. I'm going to watch, the most, recent patch. So, like, there has to be a compromise somewhere.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate for you just 1 second, right? So I think patching, and this is not me saying I agree with these things. I'm just trying to think of what the other side might 100%. Think, right? So the first thing I would say is, if you're a good team, you're going to be adjusting just as good to these patches anyway, right? So that it's a test of skill to be able to adjust. And the other thing is we wouldn't have storylines like the Washington Justice if we didn't patch if we didn't patch in the midseason like that. It provides other teams opportunities to be successful. What do you say to that?
I think I can't disagree any harder. We'll start backwards.
Okay.
I think having bad teams is fantastic for storylines. You don't want a bad team league, business wise, right? You don't want just, a garbage team. They don't do any marketing. They don't do anything good. They're just, bad. Having them be able to, show a good performance towards the end of the season, that's fantastic. But that doesn't really get to, excuse how poorly things were managed, how poorly, even going into the league, there was drama surrounding this team. I don't think that teams should be really rewarded for just doing poorly and not being able to adapt. That goes into the next point. If you're a good team, you'll always adapt. I think that's something that gets thrown around a lot. I don't think people realize how much goes into a good team. That's such a hard, it's such a hard thing to draw parallels to, because there's nothing in traditional sports or even, martial arts that really captures how different something can be when you just get thrown a patch and a new character. It's like, okay, cool. We're going to have a jujitsu match and you just get to spawn a third leg. Okay, that's a third leg. Like, why is that a thing? Why does that get to happen in this environment? That doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't matter how good you are, things are going to happen, things are going to change, and you're now telling me I have to just adapt to it or I'm just bad. And like, no, that doesn't make much sense. We can adapt to it during the break. That doesn't add up. I can't disagree more with that.
Interesting. Good stuff, Volamel. I love hearing what you think on such like a different plane than I think a lot of us plebs do. You always seem to be just a 2 levels ahead. But on a lighter note, let's go back to the PTR a little bit, because you also mentioned something about how people have been complaining and been getting what they want. So something, a parallel that I wanted to draw there is it kind of reminds me of when you see a kid at a store and they're crying because they didn't get candy and their mom gives them candy, right? And it's like, all right, what lesson did they learn, right? That they just get what they want when they complain. Do you think that that's a little bit of a driving factor towards some of this stuff? And then to follow up on that, there are legitimate concerns when it comes to this game and its freshness. Sure. And, we'll talk about roll queue in just a second, how long it takes to even get into a game. And the game needs to feel good and fresh occasionally to maintain interest. So these people complaining aren't necessarily always coming from a place of
100%.
I'm spoiled and I just want this because I don't like Orisa, right?
Sure.
So where do you draw the line, right? Where do you draw the line of, okay, we're going to listen to you because we know this is bad, versus we're giving maybe a little bit too much power to the community in terms of balance?
If I'm going to be completely honest, I think this stems from a lack of not foresight, but just identity. Overwatch as a game has a giant identity crisis that is not going to go away for a number of years. Why is that? 2016, I think it was maybe even 2017, they had a very hardline stance. I think this probably was more 2015, 2016. They had a very hardline stance from a development angle that multiple heroes being in a game. So what I'm referencing is, before no hero limit. So having 6 divas and 3 tracers, 3 Winstons. That was a core design philosophy that was not going anywhere. That was changed. Now it's, okay, fine, this is great. We're going to have, all these different heroes. No matter the roles, we can just, have fun. This is your sandbox. You get to play in it. They didn't come out and say that was a design philosophy, but when you constantly come out in PR statements and in videos, it's, it's about hero switching. It's about adapting to what the enemy composition is. That's what I believe the community is led and kind of fed. That's the information that they have to, go into it. This is the identity of the game. We swap and we switch and we try to counter the enemy's composition, right? That got changed. Now we have a role limit, which is fine. But going back, like we don't know what the game is. Blizzard doesn't know what the game is. That's I think the core of this problem is that if Blizzard doesn't know what the game is, which they've shown, throughout the years, God bless them. I've got numerous Blizzard attire. I like the company, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to criticize you when, this is a mess. Nobody knows what Overwatch is. And if you don't know what the Overwatch is, how does the community going to know what the Overwatch is? You know what I'm saying? It's a individual identity crisis. Nobody knows what they want because the game is just always changing. We went from 6 divas, like I said, stalling a card on Gibraltar, to dive with triple DPS and quad DPS, which was, fun. And then goats came around and that wasn't very fun. And I think a lot of this does come from community pushback. I think that's not going to change until role lock really settles in. I think it does need a morale boost. I don't know what that is. Is that Overwatch 2? I don't know. We're going to have to wait until November to figure out what the future is for this game. But I agree, it definitely needs a morale boost. I don't know how that's going to happen. I think the community does need to be satiated at some point, because if everybody's having pitchforks and torches out, what do the investors see? If Overwatch League is propping up this game, you kind of have to make them happy. And if they're going all the way to the middleman, they're going to the layman, and they see pitchforks and flames and burn it to the ground, eat the rich, Well, shoot. Well, we better fix something. They go to the developers and say, I don't know what you need to do, but you need to fix this now. That's what I think is going on. Yes, I don't want to empower the mob, but this all comes back to the game just being, I wouldn't say rushed, but there was no identity to what this game is supposed to be. And if there was, it was lost a long time ago.
Super interesting, man. And so in terms of this PTR patch, a lot of people are saying we're moving in the right direction. You said it just about 10 minutes ago, right?
Sure.
Do you think this is one of those steps? Do you think that you're appreciating the types of changes in this PTR patch, the timing of this patch, moving into? I'm really excited to see what these contender teams are going to be able to do next season. And so this is what you want to see. You want to see more of this.
Yeah, I enjoy the timing of the patch. I'm very skeptical when it comes to community acceptance or pushback on a patch note, right? I don't know how many times we've been like, grr, we don't like goats. And then the patch comes out and it's, oh my God, Blizzard has fixed the game. Oh, roll lock is going to fix the game. Nothing is going to be a quick fix. Everything has to be paced out. Pros are going to take a long time to break those habits. Coaches are going to have to learn how to coach other different compositions and metas. This is going to take a long time to even see if it's even a step in the right direction. I think the big swaths and the changes that they're making, the big increases, not the little marginal increases to try and, slowly push ghosts out and push people in the direction, because that's something that people don't really realize about patch notes, is that a lot of it is just personal perception of what it is. Oh, this seems powerful, so I'm going to use this a little bit more. That pushes you in that direction. It's not really just about the numbers. They could placebo this so hard, and you'd never know. You'd just be like, oh wow, Ashe got a 40% damage increase. Well, I better start using her, and you'd have no idea. These patch notes have a subconscious element to them, but what this is it's placed well. It has some big changes. It has some interesting ones that are going to draw people hopefully back to the game. We're getting into BlizzCon. I'm sure we're going to get some news. What news that is, I don't know. I like it for the most part. I don't know if it's going to kill Orisa, if it's going to, murder Segment. That I've given up. I've tapped out on trying to figure out if this is actually going to work or not. I like the game. None of the metas really bother me. Like Goats was beautiful if you really could stop and pick somebody's brain and have them explain it to you. It was like, wow, this is actually really interesting, the little nuances. But that's not what, casual fans want. And I can't blame them for it. I can picture a 9 to 5 come home and I want to watch the Philadelphia Fusion. And how am I going to appreciate a Reinhardt player when I play Widowmaker? You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I 100% understand. But we have to, again, I think a lot of this comes down to formatting and structure and just, really trying to pace things out, because the way that it's going now, it doesn't make sense across the board. Is this patch going to fix things? Hopefully, I guess. I come from a pretty biased place because I don't really see a ton of problem with it. I think teams are going to adapt to it. If you gave them enough time, they'd adapt to it and you'd see more heroes and it'd be more interesting. But is this the cure-all? No. Will it help? We'd have to wait and see. Talk to me in 5 months.
Dude, like one thing that's definitely coming across and how you're saying this stuff is just you're coming from a place of passion, right? When you love something so much, it's frustrating to see these kinds of situations happen, and it seems to happen over and over again, right? So while you're saying all of these things, I really appreciate how passionate you are and how you're coming across. Because none of this is coming. And also, you're one of the most knowledgeable people I know when it comes to this game. You've been covering it for years. You were one of the first journos, right, when it came to covering Overwatch. We'll get more into that a little bit later. But just in general, man, it's just, I think you're such a great representative for
well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Who I think people should listen to, if that makes sense. So thank you so much for passing on that knowledge, because that was an absolute joy to listen to. That could have been a whole TED Talk, dude. That was
thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for passing that knowledge on to all of us who are listening as well. But we have to move on, unfortunately,
sure.
And we're going to go ahead and move on to a subject that we thought was a little intriguing a little bit earlier today. So I don't know if anyone at home home saw this, but Kotaku just came out with an article about match fixing in Counter-Strike. But one of the owners of this team does own a Contenders Australian team, so there could be a potential match fixing situation when it comes to Contenders Australia. So we're not going to talk about the match fixing in general. What we are going to talk about is the fact that I'm a little surprised that it's taken this long for it to kind of touch Overwatch. And why do you think just now, years into it, is the first time we're hearing about this? Because honestly, I think it would have been pretty easy to pass off even before this.
100%. Like, in no way is this production or the guests on this show condoning match fixing and cheating and abusing systems. But it is a game that you do have to raise an eyebrow at, right? Everything changes week by week. It feels like you'd never know. How would you be able to tell if a team just didn't adapt to the patch? Are they throwing? You have no idea. But this does set a precedent in Overwatch as a title to say, okay, well, now are they throwing for skins? The old I buy power jokes and whatnot. But this is serious. I think this is going to be another step in the direction that we're going to see esports as an idea start to be monitored. And I'm not saying the feds are coming, but there's going to be a point where a lot of this stuff gets regulated, right? And I think that's fine. I don't want government fingers all up in my games, but regulation is going to start coming within, I don't know, like years, I'd say. I'd say double digit years, but it's coming. It's inevitable. They're going to see that kids are getting signed to, multi-million-dollar deals without, representation, which I believe is still going on. Again, I don't know contract law, nor am I behind the scenes enough to know, but with everything that I see, with everything that I hear, there are still bad actors out there. So regulation isn't going to hurt anything really. It's going to help players, I think, the most, being able to set up, player associations and having a proper structure to this whole idea is going to legitimize it in everybody's eyes. So if anything, this is it's the Joker to the Dark Knight, right? It's what everybody rallies against to kind of improve everybody's life, right? It's great for everybody, but it's bad for right now. It's a precedent for Overwatch. It's another precedent for esports in general, that things are going to have to start being dug into. Books are going to have to start being opened, because if we want this to be leveled up, if we want it to evolve into something that we're truly global, regulation has to happen. Players need associations, they need representation. Teams need to kind of get their head out their rear ends and really stop with the corner cutting. And I get it's business, but these are kids we're talking about. These are 18-year-olds that they have their future ahead of them. We can't be, yanking them around much anymore. So it's, and vice versa, players, I'm just saying, sometimes they can, hold themselves hostage, which holds everybody hostage. So it's a give and take. Nobody's perfect here, but regulation is happening because of this, right? You're going to have people cutting corners and cheating deals. So it's a good thing in the future, but kind of not a great look right now.
Yeah. I mentioning that these kids are kids, right? People forget that in Contenders, you're 14 years old is the age limit. We have a couple really great players who are 14 in an Overwatch league. I don't believe anyone is in the Cool Man, I think, is the oldest person. Yeah. And I don't even think he's 30 yet. So that's something that we all have to understand, is the fact that these are kids and they need that guidance. And unfortunately, when popularity comes, there's two sides of that, right? More people are going to want to try to make this a good thing, but there's also going to be more people who are going to try to take advantage of 100%. These kids, to take advantage of the situation. And the only way to really deal with that, especially on a super large scale, is with more regulations, as bad as that kind of feels.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, I don't want, I don't need, Nancy Pelosi, bless her heart, all up in my Overwatch. But, if things are going to start shifting this way, where fame's coming and money's around to be, held off behind the scenes and backdoor deals, that can't happen, because that's going to delegitimize everything from the top down. Investors see this. They go, well, there goes my team. Well, there goes my money. Why do I want to invest into this idea when you've got, people running it behind the scenes? Then you start to get, the unsavory types, well, let's say, just throwing money at things, and it becomes a mess. There's a reason why boxing has gotten a bad rap for such a long time, because there's a lot of nonsense going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of money being handed off behind the scenes. You don't know what's real, right? We want to try and keep esports real. That's when I think regulation should be invited to a degree, right?
Totally agree, man. So it's so funny because this next subject is going to feel so light compared to everything else. It's just like a coaching change.
Sure.
So the Shanghai Dragons parted ways with some of their coaching staff a little earlier this week and have hired Coach Moon, who used to be in the Overwatch League, then coached some contenders, and now is back in the Overwatch League. We can call him a little bit of a journeyman. Quickly, is this a good move for them?
I think this was kind of written on the wall once I saw that Levi, and I'm blanking on the other coach's name off the top of my head, but once they departed from the team, it was kind of obvious to me that he would be promoted. He was on their academy team, Team CC in China. They had a fairly decent run. I think they placed second this season, or towards the end of the season, or this year rather. I don't think it's a bad thing. I do have my reservations with him. This is the coach that put Cookie on Lucio, and in China they had some bizarre compositions, to say the least. I don't think Moon's a bad coach. I think he definitely, from my understanding, is a very structured coach. But I would say the jury's out. I'm not too sure how to feel about Coach Moon. We'll have to see in 2020.
Well, Shanghai had a pretty successful season. They did make the stage finals, and they had they stopped the streak, right? It was a totally different team. Yeah. So a lot of people were taken aback by the fact that, is success being rewarded to those previous coaches, right? They had a better season. Now they're out. It's like, what kind of lesson does that teach? That your job's never really secure, right? You never really know. But unfortunately, because of time, we can't get deeper into that one, because originally when I wrote this, honestly, to be completely honest with you, it was just to I thought I was fleshing out the show, needed more time. But now I'm really excited because of just the direction this has gone.
Sure.
Because we're going to talk a little bit about World Cup. So some teams have found some funding, some teams haven't. So far, Israel just said that they're not going to be able to make it. Argentina can't make it, and there's some good players from both of those countries. But how do you feel about this format so far? It's kind of like pay your own way and you can make it. And if you can't, then you just don't get that opportunity, because the reason why I bring it up is a lot of players get scouted at World Cup.
100%.
So if you're not there, your ability to potentially get into a North American or Korean contenders team depletes by a lot. So what do you think Blizzard can do to fix this? Because with me and my uncultured brain, I'm already saying this just doesn't feel right. I wish there could be more of a participation thing. They could run online tournaments for these teams, give them a little bit more visibility, but that's just kind of not what's happening. And regions like Asian countries that aren't South Korea, regions like South America specifically, really struggle for notoriety, and this is not how you help that.
No, I agree 100%. This is another just big change from 2 years ago. I think it was World Cup. You had kind of a traveling circus around a number of different countries, having LAN qualifiers and putting people on stage and really showcasing what they can do. And as strange as it is, putting together what is basically an all-star team of people who have never played together, there's a lot of stock put into that, strangely enough. There are some definite talents that are showcased that you might not be able to see, but I can 100% tell you people have gotten noticed. People have gotten tryouts. People have gotten picked up from World Cup performances. People have been noticed from World Cup performances. So this is a big deal. Is it a big deal for me? Not really. World Cup's just a fun, kind of exhibition match, right? It's fun to banter. It's fun to, nationalistic nonsense. But the overall scope of the pay your own way idea, I think, was good, and it was paved with golden bricks, but it went the way of hell, right? Does that make sense? I think it wasn't a great idea in practice, but in theory, it was okay, cool. If you guys can pay your own way, we'd love to have you. We'd love to have you compete. We want to be able to let you showcase what you can on the world stage, right? I think that's a great intention. What ends up happening is a lot of these kids, again, kids, are put in management positions. They don't know business. They don't know who to contact. How are they going to develop? How are they going to get money to be able to fly themselves halfway across the world to be able to showcase their stuff, right? I think it's just a bad look all around. I think it's a bad PR move. I've had a discussion with this. I was pretty apathetic towards it. Like it didn't really bother me. But as I kind of talked through it, yeah, it's definitely not good, to say the least. I think it probably would have just been better if Blizzard just invited the teams. They were like, hey, look, budget, we're trying to keep this thing afloat. We want to be able to give people some opportunities, but we can't have everybody this year. So we're just going to invite these teams and throw an online qualifier in certain regions, right? I think that would have been fine. I think that makes sense. Yeah, you're going to get PR no matter what you do, bad or good. But this is just, you just hope everybody can make, to run the funds and be able to fly themselves there. But if they can't, then it's a PR hit after a PR hit. If it's not Israel, it's Brazil, and if this, that, the other thing. You don't want that constantly. If it's just going to be a first letdown of like, okay, well, we have to cut back the seeds. It's like, okay, well, that sucks, but it is what it is. But this is just going to keep happening, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the competition. I don't even know how this thing's going to be like run. Has anybody even talked about that? How is this thing actually going to happen in 2 days? Or are they opening it up a week before so they can do the qualifiers? Or is this thing just running all day long? I don't know. I'm not a World Cup guy. I don't know, but there's a lot of just not good looks all around with World Cup this year.
I've definitely thought that. Like, what if, because part of me thought that they had people pay their own way to self-eliminate, right? That,
sure,
these countries could never come, and so we just won't have to worry about it, guys, right? Because we're putting we're gatekeeping here pretty much, right? But if a lot of people do show up, and a lot of teams have found funding, just like Japan and Norway, teams that never really competed before, but like now it's kind of like, well, they might have tied their own shoelaces together because now they might have double the amount of entrants that they had expected, and they're going to have to help with getting these players around. Again, they're kids. They're going to have to help with their parents, and they're going to
translators.
Yeah, exactly.
You're in a foreign country.
It might end up potentially being more of a money sink than.
Chris, are you telling me this is going to get worse?
Maybe.
This can't get worse.
Maybe, but it could. Anyway, man. So going on to our grand finals, you're going to be there tomorrow. It's going to be in Philadelphia. So on a much lighter note, who you got, man? Who you going to take? Who's going to take the victory? Is it going to be Shock or Titans? And who's going to be your MVP?
This is a very tough question. I mentioned the $1 million question earlier, but this one really is difficult. If you go on the OWL website, we see numerous articles come out constantly debating the Titans or the Shock. You look at the statistics, they say you can paint them in a way that leads you to the Shock, but everything usually is very tight. I think their match record, their maps are very neck and neck. Head to head, it's been a trilogy all season. Stage 1 it was the Titans, stage 2 it was the Shock, stage 3 Shanghai, but it is what it is. Shock placing second. This is the finale that we all wanted. This is the title fight. This is the super fight that is going to cap off this season. We can go through the whole show notes and just berate Blizzard for all the weird mistakes and the I disagree with you type of deals, but this is hype. I can't paint it any other way. There's no criticism here. I love this. This is fantastic. But to answer the question, who is going to win? I don't really know. To be completely frank with you, I'm not backing out. I'm not backing out. I'm gonna pick. All
right.
But this is a inch game. This is margins here that I'm really grasping at straws. But I see Shock. I see a deeper roster. I see a roster that's been utilized a lot more. We're not going to see Hurig. We're not going to see Stitch. Titans are going to run the same composition. They're going to run the same style. They're very rigid. When have we seen the Titans lose? We saw them lose against Vancouver or Valiant, right? With the Sombra coming in, with throwing them off their game, that we saw them struggle early on in the season against Guangzhou and against Chengdu, right? They're forcing Titans to shift gears. They're forcing them to adapt on the fly, which they're good at. Don't get me wrong. Best scramble team in the league. I want to coin that term. In the weirdest scenarios, they can pull out team fight wins. You go back into the winners final. on Temple of Anubis. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They can't punch through Temple of Anubis point A on attack. And overtime, they come alive and they push through. How? I don't know. I have no idea. You're writing them off at that point. They go into point B, same thing happens. They get there in the overtime. They're the best scramble team in the league, bar none. If you put them one person down, no alts, there's like a 20% chance that they just pop some magic and come out on top. But with that said, Shock, I believe, is going to throw them a different look, then return back to the standard. It's going to force Titans off kilter. They're going to abuse the fact that they have a deeper bench. We've seen Super, we've seen Nevix, we've seen Architect, we've seen Rascal, coming in later in the series. I don't believe that that's just we're styling on them move. No, I think that's an actual planned out procedure that's going to take place. Having them win the season 2 title, I'd say 4-3. I think this is going to go all 7 games. I think, yes, the Titans have a lead because they can come in and pick the first map. Miss me with the whole first control being important. Oh, no teams lost on first control. That's a sample size issue. I think that's a coincidence, a great coincidence. That's a beautiful story point that you can mention on the decks, but I don't think that's going to matter. I think that's going to help them because they get to pick more maps on their bosses. They're going to start the game with their map pick so they can pick more maps as the games go on. But I don't see Shock losing. I think they've gotten the momentum. They have the deeper roster. Both teams are very adaptable. Both teams are teams of refinement. But I think as Shock's going to come out, they're going to level change. They're going to be able to beat the Titans. I say 4-3.
Awesome. Who do you have an MVP pick?
I'll say it's hard not to say Sinatra because that's just kind of easy. I'd like to see Rascal awarded. Hopefully he is going to. I think it could be Rascal. I think that's like a dark horse pick, but Rascal could get in. I think the more likely one is Sinatra, if I'm going to be completely honest.
All right, man. What I'm so excited about is rarely I feel like it occasionally happens, but when you think of the NCAA tournament or the Super Bowl or the World Series, you rarely do get the 2 best teams. I feel like one seems to stumble before you get to the finals, right? And so we actually get the 2 best teams in Overwatch League pretty much all season, right? And we get to see the best of the best. This will be the best Overwatch we will have seen all season at the highest caliber, at the highest level, in a really cool city in Philadelphia. And just like you said, it's going to be hype. But that's going to be it for what's going on in Overwatch lately. That wasn't just it. That was amazing, Volamel. That was so cool. But I'm ready to get deeper into you and your soul, my friend. And so what we call this next section is, wait, that's not Overwatch. Basically, we take 5 minutes to talk about a passion that falls outside of Overwatch, because we talk about it a lot, especially in the Overwatch community. We're people outside of it too. I used to be a teacher. You, my friend, are someone that I really respect, and this is probably why you're such a good journalist. Is you're probably one of the best active listeners that I have ever seen in my life. And so
thank you.
When we were kind of talking about what we were going to say during this section, you're like, I don't know exactly what to do, but I think this is good. I think it's wonderful, Volma. I think you've exhibited the fact that you can take an active approach to listing and you form your opinions based off of proof and coherency, right? So why is that so important to you, and how did you develop a skill like that?
I don't know that it's been developed. That is a very good question. I do not have an answer to how it was developed. I guess maybe it was just subconsciously that people seem more receptive to just, having somebody to listen to, because we're all opinionated creatures. We all want to just voice our opinions. And I think it's interesting to see how other people think and to learn about, their not necessarily their story, but just how they're thinking about things, and seeing that they're more business minded and learning something from that. Does that, hopefully that makes sense? Mm-hmm. Because you really, if you stop and you just, listen to somebody, you can learn a lot. You'd be surprised at how much or how smart people are in certain areas. In other areas, they can be completely, dumbfounded and just, don't know their head from their butt. But, it's interesting to see how how focused and how laned in expertise people can be, because they're willing to show it to you. They're willing to explain it and talk through it, and as long as you're open to listening and being, I wouldn't say humble, but just listening, just letting them vent and letting them discuss their frustrations with this, that, the other thing, this structure, I don't like this, morality, all kinds of stuff. I'm very blessed to be able to call a lot of people, you included, friends of mine, because there's a lot of incredibly intelligent conversations that go on that enrich my life, that it's just like, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. That's kind of interesting. And like, oh yeah, no, I agree. Or maybe we disagree. And then I can come to a conclusion off of that. I think it's just very fun to just learn about people, watch people, see how they act, see how they handle themselves, see how they talk.
I've experienced this with you. We were at BlizzCon last year, and I was so tired. We were at this party. It was the patio party. If you were there, you know what I'm talking about. But it was just I remember there was a point where it was just me and you just hanging out in the side, because I was like, I told myself that I wouldn't leave until I saw other people leaving.
Yeah.
And no one left until like 3 a.m. That was a terrible barometer for me. I was tired the whole time, and basically we just sat by the side and we just chatted, and it was honestly like a highlight of the entire con for me, because we got to talk about things. I honestly believe that you would have been, if it was the Greek times, the ancient Greek times, you would have been right up there with Socrates and Plato, in my opinion, because you also have the ability to, and this is hard for people, to make the other person, no matter what, feel comfortable, right?
Sure.
It's just, and it's like an energy thing with you. It's no matter what, I feel like, oh, I could trust this dude. I could talk to this guy, and everything that you said really comes through. So, Volamel, you're a good dude. So let's talk about you a little bit more as we move on from that. This is like, it must be weird as like a journalist to like get.
Yeah, no, it's very weird to be able to, arms crossed. I'm trying to, internalize all this. It's a defense mechanism, but yeah, it's weird to be put on the other side of the mic.
But we're gonna do it anyway. So just to like start easy, right? We'll lead you into it. How did you get started in this journalism thing? Because esports journalism, I say, if you go to a convention and someone's like, "I'm an esports journalist," I'm sure some people would be like, "What? That's a thing?" But yeah, like why and how?
So I've been a very avid esports fan for about, let's say, 9 years, going on 10. I think 2020 will probably be like 10 years, just like avid fan of just most esports, right? So much so that I, to the jeer and criticism of my peers, wrote a research paper. Or we were tasked for my junior year of high school to write a research paper on something that we were passionate about. And for a long time, I really loved esports. I thought it was kind of the thing of the future. We're going to have, football, of course, like that's not going anywhere, but this is growing. This is really cool. It's something that I'm into. I love video games, and seeing people play them to the nth degree is mind boggling. And it makes me want to enjoy these games more, and it drives me to practice and to learn. And that's something that I didn't really have, but I could see it mimicked in traditional sports. I could relate better to some of my peers because they were super into football. They were super into, baseball. And I could understand that then, because I was kind of being not thrust, but I was learning about competition at that age. So I was like, hey, you know what? The topic's open, so I'm going to write about esports. That's how, into this I was. I started in Halo, got into StarCraft. I knew StarCraft. I played it since I was a kid. But I got in like StarCraft 2 during the MLGs. Smash was something, again, that I think we all played as tykes, beating up on people with items on Final Destination. That was really cool to see. And it was just like, oh, people play this stuff for money. Like, this is crazy. And it just blossomed from there. Got into League of Legends. I've tried to always watch, the biggest events, no matter if I understood the game or not, to a degree. Like, I'll watch, the international for Dota. I don't know what's going on, but I try to pick little things out, and just it's something that I really and truly love. And when Blizzard announced Overwatch, I really didn't know how to feel. I come from a Blizzard household, and I It was
That's a term I've never heard before, but it's great.
Since I was a kid, it was like, oh, let me help you, Dad. You're playing Diablo, like, oh, you missed that green piece, like, go over there and get that
Oh,
loot
awesome.
that you missed. Yeah, like,
yeah.
Since I was a kid, it was Blizzard titles, bar none. But when the rumors were coming out that they were developing another game, it was like, oh, well, what is this going to be? Is this the Project Titan that everybody's talking about? Apparently not. And then it was Overwatch, and I'm like, it's the cinematic of, Tracer diving through, and there's the Doomfist gauntlet and Winston and Reaper and, all this crazy stuff. And, I remember Diablo, and I remember Warcraft, Orcs and Humans, and kind of dark games. Did we get Pixar to make this? Like, this is a little different, guys. Like, I don't know how to feel about this. It wasn't a bad feeling. It was just like, this is not normal. This is weird. So that definitely caught my interest. Not in a good way, not in a bad way. It was just like, okay, I gotta check this out just to see what it is. And it ended up being, this strange hybrid between, League of Legends and something that resembled like a Halo or a Quake that was like an FPS kind of element to it. And it caught my interest. And then, the only watch phase, closed beta came in, and luckily I got like I think a week in, I got an invite and started to play that, and it was a fantastically fun game. I don't know how I fell out of love just playing the game. I love watching the game. Watching the game's great. Playing it these days, I don't know so much, but that was the time. I think I was just working dead end jobs, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna try this. Everybody talks about writing, and never been something that I've been good at, but I seem to do fairly well with it in school. So I was like, let me see what this whole journalism thing's about. So I contacted, Drexen at Esports Heaven. He used to run a podcast called China Talk, and I remembered during that whole, or during one of the episodes, they were looking for writers. So I was like, let me check this out. Like, I had remembered it, and I emailed him like, hey, your website doesn't have any Overwatch coverage, and that's like the hot new thing right now. Like, would you be interested? And he's like, well, let's see what you got. So I wrote him out a couple of drafts, a couple articles, and I sent it to him, and he's like, yeah, I think this is good. We're going to work with you, and, let's go ahead with it.
Awesome.
I've been there ever since. I've gotten a lot of opportunities because of him. So again, my hat goes out to him for giving me opportunity, my first opportunity. And yeah, it was just kind of a let's dive in with Overwatch. It could have been StarCraft. It was just taking it was just building the minerals to be able to just say, hey, let's just try this. Let's just do it and see what happens. And it's been a wild ride, to say the least. I've gotten to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have dreamed of. So I got to thank journalism and writing for that.
Well, what a cool story. So the thing that you say there, and this is just kind of like my PSA for anyone who's listening or anyone who's interested in getting into esports, no one's going to ask you to do it, right? You have to go get it yourself. You have to grind yourself. You have to seek those opportunities. They're never just going to come to you. And that's a story that is told throughout every single person that is successful in this industry. Like you, I saw someone didn't have Overwatch coverage, so I contacted them and I suggested it, right? You have to do that in order to be successful in this industry. And so when you do, so now that we're gotten to the place where you have that journalism, right? You're working with you have the journalism. That's a good sentence. But you have the job, you're working with these people. How do you produce content so consistently? And I think that's a good question for any content creators, because do you have a process? Because it can be really hard to just write about things, but you seem to do it very consistently. How do you do it? Is it just you find something that's interesting and write about it? Do you find a lot of things interesting? What's your process?
The how the sausage is made is a very good question, because it changes kind of by the mood, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It changes on when I feel inspired, when you really get that bug that's just like, oh, this is a great idea. Like I've got a bug right now. I've got a couple projects that I'm like super excited to really dive into. Obviously finals is one of them, just to really capture what it's like at the finals and talk to some of these players and really kind of figure out where their head's at before they go on stage and maybe even after. But in terms of process, it really is consumption, if that makes sense. It's consuming a lot of things that aren't related to what I'm doing, because often you kind of have a weird pride and a weird ego that's not necessarily like, oh, I know more. It's I'm very familiar with and I have opinions on, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So going into martial arts, going into boxing, going into even, wrestling. Just seeing and consuming content, so here's the story. I went on a YouTube black hole on Japanese wood block printing. They take a wood block and they carve out a design, they put ink on it, and they, stamp out these pages. And I'm like, this is gorgeous. I had no idea this is how art was made back in the day in Japan. And one of the themes that popped up through watching, numerous videos from this guy was these views from different landmarks and how they were tied together. And it was a muse. It was just, a Greek spirit that was just like, this is it. This is you should do this. This is something that Overwatch, maybe we could do something here. It's really about just getting a bunch of ideas, just shotgun ideas. You'll figure it out. Consistency, I've always tried to be consistent, but sometimes you have to slow down and just take a break and step away, because you don't want to burn out, right?
Yep.
You have to remain consistent. Sometimes you have to take a step back. So that's definitely been something that I've always been cognizant of, because you can hit the ground running and speed through things, but you're going to run out of gas.
You might hate it in a year. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's just always returning to what's fun and what's interesting to me. 100%. Sometimes where I just, got to write the news, that's something that has to happen. But it's really about writing about what I'm interested in, what's passionate to me at the time. And that just happened to be Overwatch. There's really no secret. It's a lot of, grindy work, rereading and proofreading, and I'm still working on it. I'm nowhere near perfect. I guess that's the best way I can describe how the sausage is made. It's a lot of consumption. It's a lot of adaptations. It's a lot of parody. It's a lot of exploring a thesaurus, to say the least. I always try, if I'm writing something that I'm super interested in, it's like, okay, enough of this word. Let's try to expand the vocabulary. So that's always been fun to do as well. But yeah, that's kind of what the day-to-day looks like.
Yeah, I'm an atrocious writer, so right-click thesaurus was my god when it came to my college essays. That is for sure. So in terms of this journo space, it's actually really interesting because there are some journos that do cover a lot of different things. I'd say Jacob Wolf is one that comes to mind, and in this space, though, how competitive is it? Because it seems like all you guys are friends. Like, I am a part of the Discord, and a lot of you guys talk to each other. Is this like a competitive space, or is it more of a collaborative space?
I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I really try to just stick my head in the sand. Like, I'm not here for friends. If I make friends, that's great. I'm all about it. I'm all aboard. But I'm not. This isn't like a political game. I'm just here to try and do the best work that I can and just spit it out. And I hope y'all like it, right? That I think a comedian and a writer are very similar, because we just hope that we can make you happy. We can hope that we can just invoke something in you. So I hope that comes across. But competitive, I do feel a competition from my perspective, but it's very much like an inspired competition. Like, oh, this guy or this gal wrote this article and it's fantastic. I'll read something from Emily Rand and I'm just like, that's incredible. That was a very fun read. That makes me want to write, because it's not that I want to one up her. I want to one up Yiska or Jacob Wolf, this, that, the other thing. It's, you get inspired by seeing good work and you just want to continue to produce and hope that you could just like barely get to that level and throw pebbles at it and just like hope that's a thing. I would say there's a little bit of competition, at least on my end, because I do want to leave a nice little legacy. Whenever this whole thing goes bust and the apocalypse happens, I want to try and leave something behind that would be nice. But it's more of inspired competition. I think I'll leave it at that. It's nothing spiteful, nothing hateful, but when you see somebody put out a nice article, it's like I really want to
That's the
meet
bar
them.
now, right?
I want to meet them. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't think it's necessarily super competitive, because if you're doing it for the money, then I'd suggest you find another job.
Yeah,
but
my reaction of laughing immediately after that statement should prove to those people who are watching.
Not the most lucrative position in the world, but if you really if it calls to you, if you do fall in love with it, it is rewarding, to say the least, to have somebody come up and say like, hey, that thing you did, that was really cool, and I really enjoyed that. That's something that really kind of puts the wind in your sails, to say the least. So it's fun for right now.
I think that transitions into my next question really, really well, because you already talked about Emily Rand. We talked about Jacob Wolf a little earlier. So who are your role models in this space? Who are you kind of looking up to? Like for me, it's Achilleos and Uber, right? Those are two people that I look up to. And like you said, I want to be able to just have an iota of their talent and potentially grow with that. Who is that for you?
I think you've got to go with the old heads, Thorin, Richard Lewis, Jacob Wolf, Emily Rand. Most of the ESPN esports crew is fantastic, and I've learned a lot of storytelling, and I use a lot of their work as inspiration. Stuchu, from his days on Liquipedia, there are some timeless articles that have just kind of been put to the wayside that I constantly go back to, from a handful of writers, to say that just kind of escape me. But I think the ones that have really stuck out, at least for me, just because it's more of my sector of journalism, it's more of the history, it's more of the writing, is probably Stu Chu, Thorin, Emily Rand, like all those, that kind of crowd. I'm not super investigative. I tried it. It's not for me. I'm very much trying to please. Let me just try and art. I have dabbled in art before. I like drawing. I like painting. Sculpting is really not my thing. I just don't get it. But it's fun. I like to express things that way. So being able to do that with words was a challenge, and seeing people who have done it very well before me is very that's the wheelhouse. That's kind of where I draw inspiration from. If I'm stuck on how to explain something, I'll pull up a Rand article, I'll pull up a Thorin piece, and see how they framed it, and really look at it, and not study. I think study is overblown, because I'm not going sentence by sentence and looking at the symbolism, but I'll take a paragraph and just be like, okay, well, how did he or how did she write this to really invoke emotion, and try to remove the idea, the foundational attributes in it, and try to put it in mine. That's kind of who I look at to as a guide, as a muse to help me work through writer's block, which definitely happens. Definitely happens.
Well, Volamel, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of a time. I think my brain gained like 18 wrinkles during the process of this hour and 15 minutes. But thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. Hopefully, everyone watching learned a lot as well. So let's do a little bit of self-plug. And where can we find you online, Volamel?
You can find me on most social media platforms at Volamel. That's Volamel. Working on a couple projects. Just released an article a couple of weeks ago highlighting the finals. Maybe Sinatra and Haksal have a little bit more history than maybe you're familiar with. And then I published a piece with Coach Spazzo from Fusion University, corresponded with him throughout the entirety of them moving to Korea and their unfortunate season, we'll say, in Korea, and how that has happened, and how that hit him and the team, and what lies in the future for him. So that's up on Esports Heaven. There's some stuff coming out on Polygon, hopefully sometime soon. Big unknown feature that I'm excited to release. But other than that, same old. I'll be in the finals starting tomorrow morning. I'll be probably sitting at the airport just answering questions and surfing Twitter. So again, if you want to hang out, let me know. I'll be on Twitter. Ask away. But that's the near future for me.
Well, awesome. And thanks so much, Volamel. And you have a great time at Grand Finals. I know he'll be watching. I'll probably hit you up on Twitter as well. And that's it for Overwatch League. I've been Chris Boopasaurus Lassard, your host. And folks, ladies and gentlemen, that has been what's been going on in Overwatch lately. We'll see you next week.